Okay, we should start digging into this. Part 2 of how to position for the Bitcoin boom. Hopefully, you've all taken your ibogaine and you're ready for this.
Take a little microdose to get through this interview.
Let's microdose ibogaine. All right, so let's talk about what Bitcoin is competing against. So, if anyone listen, what is it competing against?
That's a good question. Yeah, what or whom? I think that just like always, if there is a technological revolution, there are winners and there are losers. Early adopters usually are winners. Losers in the economic sense are people who are too late or who have built up a certain status that is not easily interchangeable in this new world because maybe it is built on, being a quintillionaire and you get close to the source of that sweet dollar nectar and, and you've been at it for maybe multiple generations even, because there are kind of fiat dynasties out there of people who have just been very close to the source. So for those people, it's kind of going to be a lose, right? I mean, Bitcoin is not a net win for the entire world. In the long run, it is, but not in the short run. So yeah, I think those are the people that are going to be resisting this. Some more fiercely than others, and I think I wouldn't call them like enemies, but they won't give in very easily. They will stick to what they know, and they will try to kind of come up with strategies to deter people from being a Bitcoiner or using or buying Bitcoin. And I think that's just the general thing to be aware of, is that this is and also just to have some compassion. It's because it's such a thorough change. To some people, it's just too overwhelming to just accept it. Like it's been 14 years that Bitcoin has existed. Literally, I think everybody in the civilized, I don't want to say everybody in like an advanced economy knows what Bitcoin is, roughly speaking.
Even non-advanced economies, I would say. I mean,
maybe even more.
Yeah, I've been saying for a long time, Bitcoin has mass awareness.
Yeah.
You don't meet people these days and they say, what do you do? I've got a Bitcoin podcast. And they're like, what is Bitcoin? They're like, they've got questions. Everyone knows. Everyone knows it exists.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, I just think that the transition is going to be tough. But at the same time, it'll be tough. And then all of a sudden, I think it'll feel kind of effortless. The last bit is just going to be whoop, just like how people go bankrupt a little bit at a time and then all at once. I think similarly for hyper-Bitcoinization is going to be a tough climb. At some point we'll be like, are we ever going to get there? There's so much adversity here. And then the last bit is just going to be like nothing.
I think that also relates, collectively, yes. I also think individually that first tour of duty you do, your first 4 years. Now you can get lucky. I got lucky in that when I went deep in again, it was right at the start of 2017. Bitcoin was like $600, and by the end of the year it was 20,000.
20,000,
yeah. And I did go through a very painful experience from millionaire to nearly broke because I didn't know about bear markets, how to prepare for it. But like I still bounced back, and I did my first tour of duty, my first 4 year. It gets a lot easier after that. You know the cycles, you know the pain points, you know the stupid things you can do, but it's getting through that, and it's trying to explain. It's proof of work and time preference. I think that's what that first tour of duty teaches you: is proof of work and time preference. And if you understand both of those and you apply them to your life, then it gets a lot easier. Would you say that's fair?
Totally fair. Yeah.
I agree, and I think those are challenges that are definitely out there for all of us still. I think additionally to that, there's going to be potential prosecutions, in certain countries. This is going to be declared enemy number one. It's going to be, people are going to say this is the reason for the inflation, weirdly, turning the world upside down, but I think they'll do it. They'll blame inflation on Bitcoin. They'll kind of like have this, probably the environmental concerns are going to get blown up more, and maybe they'll say like, Bitcoiners are selfish. They want to keep everything for themselves. They don't want to share. We need to, so that is something just to be aware of. I think that we cannot, there's amazing work being done on the political side. And so I think a lot of nations are going to be very Bitcoin friendly, but at the same time, some just won't get it. We have to accept that. It's just something to generally prepare for, I think.
I think the environmental side is about to flip.
You mean pro Bitcoin?
Yeah, I think so. And I think there's a very clear line of sight in that ESG came from Larry Fink and BlackRock.
Yes. Yeah, because they weren't they like the kind of the banner child for being politically correct with regards to climate.
Yeah, and I don't know if they specifically created the ESG model, but I know they very much pushed the ESG model, and with that expectation there would be ESG charts on companies, which we do have, which are bullshit, but whatever. They pushed a lot of that agenda. It's going to be very difficult for them to push a significant Bitcoin agenda without them directly addressing the fact that the environmental concerns for Bitcoin are misguided and actually out explaining the benefits of Bitcoin. They're actually incentivized to do that. I mean, their customers are going to question this, and when Larry Fink comes out and says, Bitcoin is ESG. It covers, and by the way, with ESG, most people focus on the E.
But what does it stand for again?
So, environment, social, governance.
Yeah.
Right.
And so you look at Bitcoin's governance; it's about as pure as you can get in that the decentralization means rules, not rulers. You look at the social side of things. I mean, it's the work that, for example, bottom up. I mean, Jason Mayer's book on progressive case is actually doing a very good job explaining to progressive and progressive politicians that actually Bitcoin is a great tool for reducing income inequality and various other things. And it obviously there's very good stories on the E. So if Larry Fink is to come out with his annual newsletter, he does have an annual newsletter, doesn't he? Which everyone looks to and says, Bitcoin is the most ESG thing out there. He's incentivized to do that, and he can do it with facts and truth. You would now be in a position where the likes of the New York Times have to go, shit, maybe we got this wrong. And the Financial Times have to go, we got this wrong. And everybody has to go, we got this wrong. And I might be being hyperbolic here, but I genuinely think BlackRock is potentially the hyper-Bitcoinization trigger. Could be wrong.
Yeah, I mean, looking back, there will be these little milestones that we look at. It's like, oh, that, that and that and that. Like those factors were huge. It'll probably only be able to tell that looking back. But yeah, I this ESG stuff, in a way, it is a doctrine, right? Just like how back in the 1500s, you had doctrines revolving around the Bible and how that had to be used. And then weirdly, as the economic interests in Europe started to diverge, the Protestants would say, the Bible agrees with us. And then the Catholics would say, oh, but the Bible agrees with us. So similarly, we don't need ESG to go away. We maybe just need to, have a market for a different interpretation of ESG. And I think that'll happen. Eventually, I think economic interests tend to win, although some empires fight it. Like the Spanish Empire fought economic interests tooth and nail, and it bankrupted them. So that's possible, right? So, but doesn't mean that the underlying technology doesn't win eventually.
In your do you call it a report?
Yeah.
In your report, with what Bitcoin is competing against, you list remittances, U.S. Treasuries, payment revenues, paper money, above ground physical gold, central bank reserves, currency deposits, residential real estate. Do you think it eventually replaces all of that?
Well, it won't replace our house. But
No, but the way you think, like I think it could considerably devalue the housing market.
Yeah, I think all these categories are to a large extent like surrogates for sound money. They only exist because we don't have sound money. They would never be. I mean, of course, under a gold standard, the government could still borrow, but to a way smaller extent because the interest rates were naturally high, and because people actually realize like, oh, you're going to tax me more to pay off this debt. Whereas in the fiat world, you can borrow against the future for a long time, and the bill only comes 10 years down the road. So yeah, I think that surrogacy factor, everything is monetized. Like debt is like a form of money in a way. Housing is monetized. Like people think of a house as like their piggy bank instead of just a roof over their head. They're all money substitutes. And so once the real knight comes on the scene, people are like, oh, that's the real deal. Let's just use that. Why do we have to do all this complicated stuff? And all the middlemen get paid so much, right? Why do all the financiers and the Wall Street people have to be like so wealthy? Why can't we just save money and people talk about the robber barons with a lot of disdain. It's like, oh, these guys. But like if you think about the industries that they were involved in, it's like oil, cars, very like rudimentary building blocks of our modern society. So to me, that's exciting. Maybe that means there's going to be a new era, the Bitcoin era, where the people that are wealthiest are once more entrepreneurs that actually build stuff rather than, move money back and forth.
Which is exactly what we were saying, weren't we? A shift in the allocators of capital, because there's going to be some people who, every wave is going to get significantly more wealthy. And it's, does Michael Saylor need to sit on 120,000, whatever it is, Bitcoin forever? Or what will he start to do with that capital? How will he invest it? I mean, I know myself, if Bitcoin at $1 million, my small amount of Bitcoin becomes super valuable, I'm going to be thinking about how I can allocate that, what I can do with that. And I'd rather I was allocating it than the government.
I'm trying to remember who it was, which one of the robber barons who built all these libraries around the U.S. Maybe Carnegie. But so when he died, like he was one of the wealthiest men in the world. He left so much money. And so his foundation just really funded so many universities, and they literally built like libraries all across the U.S. And I mean, we will have to see in terms of what Michael Saylor wants to do. But so far, he's said, I plan to make education free forever. That's his goal.
That would be an unbelievable gift. But there's lots of people who will be doing different things and allocating capital in different ways. As I said, like I want to do as much as I can for my hometown.
Right.
And, I need capital to do that. And if Bitcoin keeps going up, I'll have that capital. And there'll be people all around the world able to do things like that, which I think would be great.
Well, and it's also, that's how they build churches, for example. It's like whenever there's some money available, you build a little more, and then eventually it takes 150 years. But you can do that because the money is strong. Whereas in a fiat world, you can only borrow once, and then the money starts evaporating. So you've got to build it all right now, which results in like really shitty cardboard type sticks and matches houses that break down after 20 years.
Yeah. Can we talk about what people don't really understand, like the problems in the financial system that people don't really understand? Yeah, and I would just, again, use myself as a perfect example. Prior to Bitcoin, I never thought about money. It would come into my bank, try and save a little. I would pay my bills, spend it through the month. Inflation was something I thought that was part of a growing economy. I had no understanding of the financial system, or I never felt incentivized to learn about it. So what do you think are the main things that people who maybe haven't properly discovered Bitcoin, who don't understand about what are the things they don't understand about the financial system that they need to understand?
I remember this video. I think he was interviewed while on a panel where Hans Hermann Hoppe was speaking. He's like an Austrian economist. Yeah. And somebody asked him a similar question, and he said like, well, what you want to do is you want to ask existing economists or pundits or people who are known to be part of the financial system, ask them questions like you would a 5-year-old, like a 5-year-old would do. Very, very, very simple questions.
What Bitcoin did, isn't it?
Yeah.